The conference room fell silent as Director Sarah Chen placed the photograph on the table. Every agent in the room leaned forward to study the image. It showed a compound in the mountains of Eastern Europe, surrounded by high walls and armed guards. Intelligence suggested that inside those walls, a dangerous weapons deal was about to take place, one that could shift the balance of power in an already unstable region. "We have 72 hours, Sarah said, her voice steady but urgent. "After that, the sellers disappear, and we lose our chance to stop this forever." Agent Marcus Webb studied the photo with experienced eyes. He had run operations in 12 countries over his 15-year career, but something about this mission felt wrong. The timeline was too tight. The intelligence was too thin. Most importantly, infiltrating a compound like this would take weeks of preparation, not days. "With respect," Director Marcus said, "this is impossible. We need to establish cover identities, create backgrounds, find a way inside. Even with our best people, we're looking at a month minimum." Sarah nodded slowly, as if she had expected this response. Then she pulled out a second photograph and placed it beside the first. This one showed a woman with dark hair pulled back. In a simple ponytail, wearing casual clothes and carrying shopping bags, she was walking through what looked like a local market. "The mission was approved for one reason," Sarah said quietly. "She's already there." Marcus picked up the photograph, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition. "She's been deep undercover for 8 months. 9 months, Sarah corrected. "And she's not just near the compound, she's inside it." The room erupted in whispered conversations. Natasha Volkov was a legend in their agency, known for her ability to disappear into any role, any culture, any situation. But deep cover operations were dangerous precisely because pulling someone out or changing their mission parameters could expose them and everyone around them. Agent Jennifer Parks, youngest person in the room, raised her hand slightly. "What's her current cover?" Sarah pulled up a file on the screen behind her. "She's working as a housekeeper for the compound's manager, a man named Viktor Kozlov. Viktor handles all logistics for the operation, including security, supplies, and apparently arranging weapons deals." Marcus set down the photograph and rubbed his temples. "So we want to turn a passive intelligence-gathering operation into an active intervention mission. Do we even know if Natasha is in a position to help us? According to her last communication, received 48 hours ago, she has access to most areas of the compound," Sarah explained. "Viktor trusts her. His wife trusts her. She's practically invisible to them, which is exactly what makes her valuable. But there was a problem, and everyone in the room knew it. Natasha's last scheduled communication window had been 48 hours ago. The next one wasn't for another 5 days. There was no way to contact her, no way to ask if she was willing or able to help with this new mission. They would essentially be sending in a team blindly, hoping she would understand what was happening and adapt accordingly. "This is insane," muttered Agent David Chen, Sarah's younger brother and the team's technology specialist. "We're planning an operation around someone who doesn't even know we're coming." Sarah turned to face him directly. "We don't have another choice. Every other option requires time we don't have. The weapons being sold in that compound include chemical agents that could kill thousands. If we wait, if we try to build this operation from scratch, those weapons disappear into the black market. We'll spend years trying to track them down again." Marcus understood the logic, but logic and reality were often very different things in the field. He had seen perfect plans fall apart because of one unexpected variable. And in this case, they were treating one of their own agents as a variable, a piece on the board they hoped would move in the right direction. "What exactly is the plan?" Marcus asked, knowing he would probably end up leading whatever team they sent in. Sarah pulled up a detailed map of the compound on the screen. "Tasha has reported that every Thursday evening, Viktor leaves the compound to meet with local officials. It's a regular pattern, consistent for the past 2 months. During that time, security relaxes slightly inside the compound because the primary target is away." She pointed to a section of the eastern wall, according to Natasha's intelligence. "There's a maintenance entrance here that's only monitored by cameras, no physical guards. The cameras run on a timer system, sweeping the area in predictable patterns." David has studied the timing based on Natasha's descriptions. "We have a 40-second window to get through. 40 seconds, David added, to cover 20 meters of open ground, disable the lock without triggering alarms, and get inside. It's possible, but there's zero margin for error. Jennifer studied the map carefully. Once we're inside, then what? Do we know where Natasha will be? That's where we have to trust her training, Sarah said. Natasha knows that Thursday evenings are the most vulnerable time for the compound. If she sees or hears unusual activity, if she notices anything out of the ordinary, her training tells her to investigate. We're counting on her curiosity and her instincts to bring her to us. Marcus shook his head slowly. And if she doesn't? If she's in another part of the compound? Or if Victor changes his routine this week? Or if any one of 100 things goes wrong? Sarah met his eyes steadily. Then we adapt. That's what we do. But Marcus could see something else in the director's expression, something she wasn't saying out loud. There was a personal element here, a connection that went beyond professional duty. He had heard rumors that Sarah and Natasha had trained together years ago, that they had been friends before their careers took them in different directions. "You know her?" Marcus said quietly. "This isn't just about the mission." Sarah was silent for a moment before responding. Natasha volunteered for deep cover when everyone else said it was too dangerous. She's been alone for 9 months, playing a role every single day, unable to be herself, unable to contact family or friends. Every communication she sends out could be her last if she's discovered. And now we're about to drop a tactical team into her operation without warning. She paused, and her voice became even quieter. "Yes, I know her. And yes, I trust her. But I also know what we're asking of her is almost impossible. We're asking her to recognize a threat as actually being help, to instantly understand a plan she wasn't part of creating, and to risk everything she's built over 9 months in a matter of minutes." The room was silent as everyone absorbed this. Finally, Marcus spoke. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow night," Sarah replied. "You'll fly into Romania, drive to the border region, and position yourselves 5 kilometers from the compound. You go in Thursday evening, during Victor's absence. Total team size is 4. You'll choose who comes with you." Marcus looked around the room, mentally calculating who he would need. David was essential for technology and security systems. Jennifer was their best linguist and could pass for a local if they encountered anyone. That left one more spot. "I want Agent Torres," Marcus said, referring to a field medic who had saved his life 2 years ago in Syria. "If something goes wrong, if anyone gets injured, including Natasha, I want someone who can handle it." Sarah nodded. "Approved. You have 24 hours to prepare. Study everything we have on the compound, on Victor, on the security systems. Memorize the layout. This operation succeeds or fails in the first 5 minutes after you enter that building." The meeting broke up, and agents began gathering files and equipment lists. Marcus stayed behind. He picked up the photograph of Natasha again, studying her face. She looked relaxed in the image, comfortable in her role. But he knew that comfort was an illusion, a performance she maintained every single day. "Good," Sarah said, coming to stand beside him. "The best I've ever worked with. If anyone can pull this off, it's her." "But she doesn't know we're coming," Marcus reminded her. "For all she knows, Thursday night is just another Thursday. She'll be thinking about laundry or dinner or whatever her cover story requires." And then suddenly, 4 armed agents appear in the compound she's been carefully maintaining access to for 9 months. "That's why we chose you to lead this," Sarah said. "You're good at reading situations, at adapting. If you get in there and realize it's not going to work, if you see that Natasha can't help or that her cover will be blown, I trust you to call it off." Marcus nodded, but they both knew that calling off a mission once you were inside an enemy compound was easier said than done. Once they crossed that wall, once they entered that building, they were committed. Retreat would be almost as dangerous as moving forward. Over the next 24 hours, Marcus and his team prepared with intense focus. They studied maps until they could draw the compound layout from memory. They practiced the entry technique dozens of times, shaving seconds off their approach. David built a replica of the security system they would encounter, and they practiced defeating it until they could do it in darkness, with gloves on, in under 30 seconds. Jennifer worked on her cover story, the explanation she would give if they were caught. She would claim to be a journalist investigating illegal weapons, separated from her crew. It was thin, but it might buy them a few crucial seconds. Agent Torres, whose first name was Maria, packed medical supplies into the smallest possible containers, prioritizing items that could handle trauma injuries. On their last evening before departure, Marcus received a private message from Sarah. It contained Natasha's complete file, including personal information that was normally restricted. Marcus understood what Sarah was telling him without words. If this mission went wrong, if Natasha was exposed or captured, he needed to know who she really was, what she had sacrificed, so he could make the right decisions about trying to save her. He read through the file late that night in his hotel room. Natasha Volkov had been born in Moscow but emigrated to the United States with her family when she was 12. She had joined the agency at 23. Straight out of university, where she had studied international relations and psychology, her performance evaluations were exceptional. Her mission's success rate was 94%, higher than almost anyone in the agency's history. But it was the personal notes that caught Marcus's attention. Natasha had no family left. Her parents had died in a car accident 5 years ago. She had never married, never had children. The agency was her entire life, her only family. When she disappeared into deep cover operations, no one waited for her return. No one called asking where she was or when she would be home. Marcus closed the file and stared at the ceiling of his hotel room. Somewhere in the mountains of Eastern Europe, Natasha Volkov was probably sleeping, unaware that tomorrow night would change everything. She didn't know that 4 agents were about to enter her carefully constructed world. She didn't know that the mission she had been running for 9 months was about to become something entirely different. The mission was approved for one reason, Sarah had said. She was already there. But Marcus understood now that there was another reason, an unspoken one. Natasha had no one to object if things went wrong. She had no family to demand answers, no loved ones to file complaints. In the cold mathematics of intelligence work, she was the perfect asset, because she was completely expendable. Marcus didn't sleep well that night. He kept thinking about the photograph of Natasha in the market, carrying shopping bags, looking like an ordinary person, living an ordinary life. But nothing about her life was ordinary. Everything was performance, calculation, survival. And tomorrow, he and his team were about to make her survival even more complicated. The plane left at dawn. By sunset the next day, they were in position 5 kilometers from the compound, watching through binoculars as lights began to appear in windows. Somewhere inside those walls, Natasha was playing her role, being invisible, being trusted. In a few hours, everything would change, and Marcus could only hope that when the moment came, she would understand that the intruders in her compound were not enemies but friends. Though in their line of work, the difference between the two was sometimes impossibly thin. The compound looked different through night vision goggles. What appeared as warm, inviting lights from a distance now showed up as harsh green shapes against black walls. Marcus checked his watch for the 10th time in as many minutes. Victor's car had left exactly on schedule, passing through the main gate at 7:15. It was now 8:30. The team was moving into position. They had parked their vehicle 3 kilometers away and hiked the rest of the distance. Through rough terrain, each team member carried minimal equipment, just enough to get in, complete the mission, and get out. David had the electronic tools to defeat the security system. Jennifer carried communication devices, and her journalists covered documents. Maria had medical supplies. Marcus had weapons and the authority to make split-second decisions that could save or end lives. "Camera sweep in 30 seconds, David whispered, his eyes on the tablet that was tracking the security system's patterns. "Then we have our 40-second window." They were crouched behind a rocky outcropping about 50 meters from the eastern wall. From here, they could see the maintenance entrance Natasha had described in her reports. It looked exactly as she had documented, a simple metal door with a numeric keypad, painted the same color as the wall to make it less noticeable. "Remember," Marcus said quietly to his team, "once we're inside, we don't know what we'll find. Stay flexible. Watch for Natasha, but don't assume she'll approach us. If she sees us first, She might think we're a threat to her operation. Or an actual threat, Jennifer added. She's been living with these people for 9 months. Her instincts might tell her to protect them before she recognizes us, was a valid concern. Deep cover agents sometimes developed complicated relationships with their targets. Not loyalty exactly, but a kind of protective familiarity that could override training in critical moments. They had to be prepared for the possibility that Natasha might not immediately help them, or might even work against them if she thought they were endangering her carefully maintained cover. 15 seconds, David announced. Marcus felt his heartbeat slow, entering the calm focus that came before action. He had done this countless times before, but it never became routine. Every mission carried its own unique dangers, its own specific ways things could go catastrophically wrong. 10 seconds. The team rose from their crouch into a ready position. They would sprint the distance to the wall, taking advantage of the blind spot in the camera's sweep. David would work on the door while the others provided cover and watched for any signs they had been spotted. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, go. They moved as one unit, 4 shadows flowing across open ground. Marcus counted his steps automatically, a habit from years of training. 20 meters seemed both impossibly far and suddenly very close. They reached the wall, pressing themselves flat against it, and David immediately went to work on the keypad. His fingers moved with practiced precision, attaching a small device that would run through possible combinations faster than any human could. The device hummed softly, barely audible even in the quiet night. Seconds ticked by. 35 seconds since they had left cover. 38, 40. Got it, David breathed, and the door clicked open. They slipped inside one by one, and David gently closed the door behind them. They were in a narrow corridor that smelled of cleaning supplies and damp concrete. Dim lights overhead provided just enough illumination to see by. According to Natasha's reports, this corridor led to the service areas of the compound. The kitchens and storage rooms where staff worked. Marcus pulled out a small earpiece and fitted it into his ear. The others did the same. From now on, they would communicate only through whispers and hand signals, maintaining absolute noise discipline. Every sound could give away their position. They moved down the corridor slowly, checking each corner before proceeding. The building seemed quiet, which was both good and concerning. Where was everyone? Where were the guards who should be patrolling? Where was Natasha? A door ahead opened suddenly, and a man in casual clothes stepped into the corridor carrying a box. He looked up and froze, his eyes going wide with surprise and fear. Before anyone could react, a hand reached out from behind the man and pressed something against his neck. He collapsed silently, and a woman stepped over his body into the corridor. It was Natasha. She looked different from her photographs. Her hair was shorter, her face thinner. She wore the plain clothes of a housekeeper, and there was a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there in the images Marcus had studied. She looked at the team with an expression that was equal parts recognition and fury. "You absolute idiots," she whispered harshly, dragging the unconscious man back through the doorway. "Get in here before someone else sees you." The team followed her into what appeared to be a storage room filled with cleaning supplies. Natasha closed the door and turned to face them, her arms crossed. "What are you doing here?" "Who authorized this?" Director Chen Marcus said quietly. "There's a weapons deal happening in this compound in the next 48 hours. We need to stop it." Natasha closed her eyes briefly, and Marcus could see her mind working through the implications. When she opened her eyes again, the anger was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Resignation, perhaps? Or acceptance of an impossible situation. "Victor is meeting with the buyers tomorrow night," she said. "Not 48 hours from now. Tomorrow, you're early. Which means either your intelligence is wrong or someone fed you bad information. Can you get us access to the meeting?" Marcus asked. Natasha laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Access. This compound is about to become the most heavily guarded location in the region. Victor is bringing in extra security for the meeting. Tomorrow morning, a dozen armed men arrive. By tomorrow evening, every inch of this place will be watched. Then we extract you now and call in an airstrike or a full tactical team and kill everyone in the compound." Natasha shot back. "There are 23 staff members here. cooks, cleaners, drivers. Most of them have no idea what Victor really does. You want to murder them to stop a weapons deal? The distraction Natasha created at 2 in the morning was spectacular. Somehow, she had managed to trigger a small fire in the kitchen area. Nothing dangerous, but enough smoke to set off alarms and send guards running. While everyone was focused on the eastern side of the compound, Marcus and his team slipped out through the maintenance entrance. Moving like ghosts through the darkness, they reached their vehicle and drove to a position overlooking the south road, arriving well before dawn. The waiting was the hardest part. They sat in silence, checking equipment, running through the plan in their minds. Marcus had studied every photograph they had of Victor, memorizing his posture, his expressions, the way he moved. He would have only seconds to convince Anna that he was her husband before she could react or raise an alarm. At 7:55, David spotted the car coming down the road. It was a black Mercedes with tinted windows, exactly as Natasha had described. The vehicle approached the river crossing where a temporary construction barrier had been set up the night before. Courtesy of Jennifer's skills with local signage and traffic equipment, the Mercedes slowed and stopped. This was the moment. Marcus pulled on the jacket that matched Victor's style, adjusted the cap that would shadow his face, and stepped out of their vehicle. He walked toward the Mercedes with confident strides, the walk of a man who owned everything he saw. The driver's window rolled down, and a security guard looked out with confusion. What is this? Why is there a barrier? Marcus spoke in Russian, his accent carefully practiced. Construction. Take the west road instead. The guard was about to argue when the rear window rolled down, and Anna looked out. In that instant, Natasha leaned forward from her seat beside Anna and spoke rapidly. Anna, listen to me carefully. These are the people I told you about. The ones who can help you. Please trust me. Anna's eyes went wide. She looked from Natasha to Marcus and then seemed to understand. For 9 months, Natasha had been preparing her for this moment, planting seeds of doubt about Victor's business, offering hints that there might be a way out. Now that moment had arrived, and Anna had perhaps 3 seconds to decide which way her life would go. Where is Victor? Anna asked, her voice shaking. He's at the compound, Natasha lied smoothly. He sent these people to protect us. There's been a threat. Something about the meeting tonight. He wants us to take extra precautions. It was a thin story, but it played on Victor's paranoia. Something Anna would believe, because she had lived with that paranoia for years. She looked at the security guard. Do as they say. We're taking the west road. The guard looked uncertain, but Anna was Victor's wife, and her word carried weight. He began to turn the car around. That's when everything went wrong. A second vehicle appeared on the road behind them, another car from the compound. Victor himself was in the back seat, having apparently decided at the last minute to accompany his wife after all. The vehicles were now facing each other on the narrow road, and there was nowhere to go. Victor stepped out of his car, flanked by his 2 bodyguards. He looked angry and suspicious. What's going on here? Why is there a barrier? And who are you? Marcus had a fraction of a second to make a choice. Abort the mission, try to talk their way out, or commit fully to an impossible situation. He chose commitment. I'm Agent Webb, and you're under arrest for illegal weapons trafficking. The words hung in the air for a frozen moment. Then everything exploded into chaos. Victor's bodyguards reached for their weapons. David activated a signal jammer he had prepared, blocking all communications from the vehicles. Jennifer threw a flash grenade that temporarily blinded everyone. Maria moved toward Anna's car to protect the civilians. Marcus rushed forward, using the confusion to close the distance to Victor. One of the bodyguards recovered quickly and raised his weapon. But Natasha appeared from Anna's car and struck him from behind with something heavy. The man went down and Natasha grabbed his weapon. The second bodyguard was smarter. He grabbed Victor and began dragging him back toward his vehicle, using his boss as a shield. Back off or he dies. The guard shouted in Russian. You won't kill him, Marcus called back. Victor pays your salary. He's your protection. Without him, you're just another criminal with no connections and no leverage. It was a gamble, but it worked. The bodyguard hesitated, and in that moment of uncertainty, David hit him with a tranquilizer dart from a weapon he had been carrying. The guard collapsed and Victor stumbled forward, now completely alone and surrounded. "It's over," Marcus said, approaching the terrified man. "We have evidence of your weapons dealings, your contacts, everything. Come quietly, and you might live long enough to testify against your buyers." Victor looked around wildly. Seeing his guards unconscious, his wife staring at him with something that looked like relief rather than concern, and Natasha holding a weapon pointed directly at his chest. "You," he said to Natasha, his voice filled with betrayal. "You're with them?" "For 9 months," Natasha said coldly. "Every conversation, every document you left lying around, every security code you used when you thought I wasn't paying attention? I've been collecting evidence the entire time." Victor's face went pale. He understood now just how completely he had been fooled, how his trust in a simple housekeeper had destroyed everything. "Anna knew?" he asked, looking at his wife. Anna stepped out of the car, her face composed despite the chaos around her. "I suspected. Natasha gave me hope that one day this nightmare would end. Thank you for making that day today." The rest happened quickly. They secured Victor and his guards, disabled their vehicles, and divided into 2 groups. David, Jennifer, and Maria would take Victor to a secure location 20 kilometers away and wait for extraction. Marcus, Natasha, and Anna would return to the compound, with Marcus now fully committed to impersonating Victor. "You understand what you're walking into?" David asked Marcus before they separated. "If anyone at that compound realizes you're not Victor, they'll kill you and Natasha both." "I understand," Marcus said. "But those weapons can't be sold. If we don't stop this deal tonight, we lose our chance forever." The drive back to the compound was tense. Marcus sat in the back seat, where Victor had been, wearing Victor's clothes, Victor's watch, even Victor's cologne. Natasha sat up front with the driver, who had been unconscious during the confrontation and believed the cover story. They had been stopped by police checking for drunk drivers. Anna sat beside Marcus, and he could feel her shaking despite her brave face. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now you go to your appointment as planned," Marcus said quietly. "When you return this afternoon, act normal. Tonight, when the meeting happens, stay in your rooms no matter what you hear. Tomorrow, you'll be free to start a new life. And Victor? He'll face justice for what he's done. That's all I can tell you." They arrived back at the compound at 9:30. Marcus kept his head down, his hat shadowing his face as they drove through the gate. He noticed Natasha tense slightly when they passed the guard post, but the guards waved them through without question. So far, so good. Anna went to her rooms to rest before her appointment. Natasha, playing her role perfectly, asked if Victor needed anything. Marcus waved her away with the kind of dismissive gesture he had seen Victor make in surveillance videos. She left, and Marcus found himself alone in Victor's study, surrounded by the man's personal effects. This was the most dangerous part. For the next few hours, he had to be Victor. He had to respond to people as Victor would, make decisions as Victor would, even think as Victor would. One wrong word, one out-of-character response, and everything would unravel. A knock on the door made his heart race. "Come in," he said, deepening his voice to match Victor's tone. One of the compound's senior security officers entered. "Boss, the additional men have arrived. 12 as requested. Where do you want them positioned?" Marcus pulled up a mental map of the compound that Natasha had provided. 6 on the outer perimeter, rotating every 2 hours. For near the vault entrance, 2, with me, during the meeting. I want discipline tonight. No drinking, no distractions. These buyers are serious people. Security officer nodded. Understood. And the weapons. You want them ready to load immediately after the deal closes? No, Marcus said, making a split-second decision. I want them loaded before the buyers arrive. Once they've inspected the goods and made payment, I want them out of here within 30 minutes. The longer those weapons sit in my compound after the sale, the more risk we carry. The officer looked slightly surprised. This was apparently different from Victor's usual protocol. That means the buyers will see we're prepared to move quickly. They might think we're nervous. I am nervous, Marcus said. Chemical weapons draw attention. I want this deal done fast and clean. Is that a problem? No, boss. No problem. We'll have everything loaded and ready by 7. The buyers arrive at 8, correct? Correct.
I'll go.
I have calls to make. The officer left and Marcus exhaled slowly. His decision to have the weapons loaded early was risky, but strategic. If the weapons were already on trucks, it would be easier to intercept them. He just had to figure out how to alert his agency without blowing his cover. Throughout the afternoon, Marcus played his role. He took phone calls, speaking as little as possible and using Victor's known phrases and speech patterns. He signed documents without reading them, trusting that no one would expect Victor to suddenly start carefully reviewing paperwork. He barked orders at staff and generally behaved like a paranoid criminal preparing for a major transaction. Natasha appeared twice, once bringing him lunch and once asking about dinner preparations. Each time, they made brief eye contact, and Marcus could see the tension in her face. This was her operation, her 9 months of work, all coming down to the next few hours. If he failed, she would likely pay with her life. At 6 in the evening, Marcus walked down to the vault with 2 security guards. This was the critical moment. He needed to access the vault to verify the weapons were being loaded correctly, but he didn't have Victor's codes. Natasha had managed to learn 3 of the 4 security sequences over her months of observation, but the final code was something Victor changed weekly and kept only in his head. Marcus stood in front of the vault keypad, very aware of the guards watching him. He had to try Natasha's codes and hope that Victor hadn't changed the final sequence this week. He entered the first 3 codes exactly as Natasha had provided them. Each one worked, bringing him closer to the final barrier. For the 4th code, Marcus had to guess. He thought about what he knew of Victor's personality, his paranoia, his habits. Men like Victor often used dates that were significant to them, but not obvious to others. Not birthdays or anniversaries, those were too easy. But maybe the date of his first major deal, or the date he acquired the compound? Marcus entered a sequence based on the compound's purchase date, a detail he had seen in one of Victor's files. The keypad beeped, and for a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the vault door clicked and began to swing open. The guards seemed satisfied. Why wouldn't they be? Their boss had just opened his own vault exactly as he had done many times before. Marcus stepped inside and found himself surrounded by crates containing some of the most dangerous weapons on the black market. Chemical agents, biological materials, even a few small tactical nuclear devices that could level city blocks. "Get these loaded," Marcus ordered. "Carefully. If anything breaks, we all die." The loading process took nearly an hour. Marcus supervised, making sure to maintain Victor's authoritative presence while also memorizing every detail he could about the weapons, their quantities, and their storage. This information would be critical for the agency's final assault. By 7:30, 3 trucks were loaded and ready to go. The buyers would arrive in 30 minutes. Marcus returned to Victor's study and managed to send a brief coded message through Victor's computer, hoping his team would intercept it and understand the situation. The message simply read, "Packages ready for delivery at location Alpha." Timeline moved up. Proceed as planned. At 7:55, Natasha appeared at the study door. She looked frightened. "They're here," she said. "The buyers have arrived early. They have more men than expected, and they're asking questions about why the weapons are already loaded." Marcus felt ice run through his veins. The buyers were suspicious, which meant they were on alert. Any wrong move now could spark a firefight that would kill everyone in the compound, including the innocent staff members who had no knowledge of Victor's activities. "Tell them I'll be right out," Marcus said. And Natasha, "Thank you for everything." She nodded once and disappeared. Marcus stood, straightened Victor's jacket, and prepared to walk into a meeting with international weapons. Buyers who would kill him without hesitation if they suspected anything was wrong. He had no backup inside the compound, no way to call for help without exposing himself, had only his wits and his ability to impersonate a man he barely knew. The mission was approved for one reason, Director Chen had said. She was already there. But now Marcus understood that the mission would succeed or fail for one reason as well. He was there, standing in Victor's shoes, about to face the most dangerous negotiation of his life. And somewhere in the compound, Natasha was waiting and watching, ready to act if everything fell apart. Marcus walked out of the study and headed toward the meeting room, each step taking him deeper into a situation where the margin for error had shrunk to nothing. The next hour would determine whether they stopped a weapons deal that could kill thousands, or whether they all died trying. There was no longer any middle ground, no safe option to fall back on. They were committed, and the only way out was through whatever waited for them in that meeting room with armed criminals who dealt in death for profit. Marcus took a deep breath, pushed open the door, and stepped inside to face the buyers, hoping his performance would be good enough to fool men whose survival depended on never being fooled. The meeting room was thick with tension. 4 men sat around the table, each wearing expensive suits that couldn't quite hide the hardness in their eyes. These were not businessmen playing at being criminals. These were career weapons dealers who had survived in the most dangerous profession in the world by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone else. The man at the head of the table stood when Marcus entered. He was tall, gray-haired, with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. "Victor," he said, but his tone held suspicion rather than greeting. "Your hospitality has changed. Usually, you invite us in for drinks and conversation before business. Tonight, we arrived to find armed men everywhere and weapons already loaded on trucks. It feels less like a sale and more like an ambush." Marcus had to think fast. He channeled everything he knew about Victor's personality, his paranoia, his need to appear in control. "The world has changed, Dmitri. I have competitors who would love to know about this meeting. I'm taking precautions. The faster we complete this transaction, the safer we all are." Dmitri studied Marcus's face, searching for something. The moment stretched uncomfortably long. Then Dmitri smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Paranoia keeps us alive in this business. I understand. But I'll need to inspect the merchandise before we discuss payment." "Standard procedure," of course, Marcus said, gesturing toward the door. "The trucks are prepared. You can inspect everything." They walked outside into the compound's central yard. The 3 trucks sat with their engines idling, guards positioned around them. Dmitri's men began opening crates, checking contents, verifying quantities. Marcus stood beside Dmitri, forcing himself to remain calm, even as his mind raced through contingencies. "These chemical agents," Dmitri said. Watching his men work, "they're more sophisticated than what you usually offer. Military grade? Where did you acquire them?" Marcus hadn't expected detailed questions about provenance. He took a gamble. "You know, I don't discuss my sources. You want the weapons or not?" Dmitri turned to look at him directly. "I'm curious, Victor, because these particular agents were reported stolen from a military facility in Germany 3 months ago. The theft made international news. The kind of theft that draws serious attention from serious agencies." Marcus felt sweat form on his back, despite the cool evening air. Dmitri was testing him, probing for any sign of weakness or deception. "Which is why I'm selling them quickly," Marcus said. "I don't keep hot merchandise longer than necessary. You're getting a deal because I need them gone," or Dmitri said softly. "Someone is setting a trap. Someone learned about our meeting and wants to catch both buyer and seller in one operation. It would be quite elegant, actually. Replace Victor with an agent, use him to lure us here, then close the net." Right. The accusation hung in the air. Marcus could see Dmitri's hand moving slowly toward the weapon at his hip. Around them, guards were becoming alert, sensing the change in atmosphere. Everything was about to collapse. Then Natasha appeared, hurrying across the yard with a phone in her hand. "Boss!" she called out, using Victor's preferred title. "Your brother called. He says it's urgent." "Something about your mother" was a perfect interruption, a distraction that gave Marcus a few seconds to think. But it was also dangerous because Marcus knew nothing about Victor's family. He took the phone from Natasha, seeing trust in her eyes mixed with fear. She had just committed herself completely to this deception. Marcus held the phone to his ear, pretending to listen to someone who wasn't there. He let his expression change, showing concern, then anger, then resignation. After a moment, he lowered the phone. "Family emergency," he said to Dmitri. "My mother is in hospital. If you want to back out of this deal, do it now. Otherwise, let's complete the transaction so I can get to her." It was a risky play. Showing weakness, showing human emotion, was not something Victor typically did. But it was also the kind of unpredictable detail that was hard to fake. Real life didn't follow scripts. Real emergencies happened at the worst possible times. Dmitri studied Marcus for another long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I hope your mother recovers. Family is important. Even in our line of work, perhaps especially in our line of work, family is what matters." He gestured to his men to finish the inspection. The moment of crisis had passed, at least temporarily. But Marcus knew they weren't safe yet. The inspection continued for another 20 minutes. Dmitri's men were thorough, checking serial numbers, testing samples, verifying everything. Finally, they reported back that the merchandise was genuine and complete. "Payment," Dmitri said, and one of his men brought forward a metal briefcase. 10 million euros, as agreed. "You can count it if you wish." Marcus shook his head. "I trust you, Dmitri. We've done business before." Another gamble. He had no idea Victor and Dmitri had a history of mutual trust. But counting 10 million euros would take time, and time was their enemy now. Dmitri seemed pleased by the response. "Then we're done. My men will drive the trucks from here. We'll never see them or me again." "Wait," Marcus said, suddenly having an idea. "Your route, have you planned it?" Dmitri's expression became guarded again. "Why do you ask?" "Because there are police checkpoints on the main roads. New security measures because of recent terrorist threats. If your trucks are stopped and inspected, we both lose everything." Dmitri's men exchanged glances. This was clearly news to them. "What do you suggest?" Dmitri asked carefully. Marcus pulled out a map that he had seen in Victor's study. He pointed to a route that he had memorized earlier, a route that would take the trucks through an area where he knew his agency had assets positioned. "This road. It's longer, but there are no checkpoints. I've used it myself for sensitive shipments." He could see Dmitri calculating, weighing the advice against his suspicion. "Why tell me this?" "Right. Why do you care if we're stopped after the sale is complete?" "Because if you're caught with these weapons, you'll tell the police where you got them. My name will come up. I'm protecting myself by protecting you." The logic was sound enough that Dmitri nodded. "We'll take your route. Thank you for the advice." The trucks began to move, driving toward the compound's main gate. Marcus watched them go, his heart pounding. If his coded message had gotten through, if his team had understood and positioned themselves correctly, those trucks would be intercepted 5 kilometers down the road. The weapons would be secured, the buyers would be arrested, and Victor's entire operation would collapse. But if the message hadn't gotten through, if something had gone wrong, those trucks were about to disappear into the black market with enough chemical weapons to kill tens of thousands of people. Dmitri and his remaining men followed the trucks on foot toward their own vehicles. As they passed Marcus, Dmitri paused. "Victor, one last thing. Your wife, Anna. I noticed she wasn't here tonight to play hostess, as she usually does. I hope she's well." Marcus felt ice run through his veins. He had no idea if Anna usually attended these meetings. "She's resting," he said carefully. "The stress of recent weeks has affected her health." "Of course," Dmitri said. "Please give her my regards. And Victor, take care of your mother. In our business, we sacrifice much, but we should never sacrifice family." Dmitri left, and Marcus stood in the compound yard, alone except for the guards who were now relaxing since the tense meeting was over. He had done it. He had completed the sale, directed the buyers toward an interception point, and maintained his cover as Victor throughout the entire process. Now he just had to survive the next few hours until he could confirm the weapons were secured and arrange his own extraction. He walked back toward Victor's study, his legs feeling weak from the adrenaline crash that was starting to hit him. Natasha appeared from the shadows near the house. She approached quickly, her face anxious. "Did it work? Did they buy it?" "Act. For now," Marcus said quietly, "but we're not safe yet. How long before someone realizes Victor hasn't called to check on his mother?" How long before Anna says something that contradicts the story? Anna is playing her part perfectly, Natasha assured him. She's terrified but determined. As for Victor's brother, I took a chance that no one here knows Victor's family well enough to question a phone call. Was I wrong? You were brilliant, Marcus said. You saved the entire operation with that interruption. They heard the sound of vehicles in the distance, followed by what might have been gunfire, though it was too far away to be certain. Marcus and Natasha exchanged a glance. Either the interception was happening, or the buyers had run into some other trouble. What do we do now? Natasha asked. We wait, Marcus said. And we hope that in about 2 hours, extraction teams arrive to pull us out before someone figures out what really happened here tonight. Those 2 hours were the longest of Marcus's life. He sat in Victor's study, maintaining the pretense of making phone calls about his fabricated family emergency. Guards came and went, reporting that the buyers had departed safely. Everything seemed normal, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go catastrophically wrong. At 10:30, his phone buzzed with a coded message from David. Packages secured. All buyers in custody. Extraction en route. ETA 20 minutes. Marcus felt relief wash over him like a wave. They had done it. The weapons were secure, the criminals were captured, and extraction was coming. He just had to hold his cover for 20 more minutes. But then an alarm began to sound throughout the compound. Guards ran past the study toward the main gate. Marcus heard shouting in Russian, something about police and helicopters. The extraction team wasn't trying to be subtle. They were coming in with force. A guard burst into the study. Boss, we're under attack. Police helicopters, armored vehicles. They're at the main gate demanding we surrender. What do we do? Marcus stood, making the most important decision of the entire mission. We surrender. Tell everyone to put down their weapons and come out with their hands up. This compound is over. The guard looked shocked. Boss, we can fight. We have weapons, fortified positions. We can hold them off, Marcus said firmly. Those weapons we just sold, they were chemical agents. If shooting starts, if anything explodes, everyone in this compound dies, including us. Tell the men to stand down now. The guard hesitated, then ran to carry out the order. Marcus heard him shouting commands, heard the surprised responses from other guards. Then slowly, the sound of weapons being set down, of men moving toward the exits with their hands raised. Natasha appeared at the study door. It's time to go. What about Anna? Marcus asked. Already safe? My first priority when the alarm sounded was getting her to the extraction point. She's probably already on a helicopter heading to safety. Marcus nodded. Then let's finish this. They walked out of the study together, through the compound that had been Natasha's home and prison for 9 months. Guards were filing out into the yard with their hands up, surrounded by heavily armed police and military personnel. Helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights turning night into day. Director Sarah Chen was there, standing near an armored vehicle, watching the scene unfold. When she saw Marcus and Natasha emerge from the house, relief flooded her face. She walked toward them quickly. Are you both okay? Sarah asked, her professional composure cracking slightly. We're alive, Natasha said. That's about all I can manage right now. Sarah turned to Marcus. The weapons are secure. All 3 trucks were intercepted exactly where you indicated. Dmitry and his entire organization are in custody. Victor is already being processed. This is the biggest weapons bust in a decade. And the staff? Marcus asked. The cooks, the cleaners, the people who didn't know what Victor was really doing here. Being interviewed and processed, Sarah said. Most will be released once we verify they weren't involved. We're not interested in punishing innocent people. Natasha swayed slightly and both Marcus and Sarah moved to steadier. The toll of 9 months undercover, followed by the intensity of the past 24 hours, was finally catching up with her. I'd like to go home now, she said quietly, wherever that is. Sarah put an arm around her. Home is wherever you want it to be. You've earned the right to decide what comes next. As they walked toward the waiting helicopters, Marcus looked back at the compound one last time. It looked smaller now, less threatening. Without Victor's presence, without the weapons, it was just a building filled with frightened people who were realizing their lives were about to change forever. The mission was approved for one reason, Sarah had said at the beginning. She was already there. But Marcus understood now that the mission succeeded for many reasons. Because Natasha had the courage to spend 9 months living a lie. Because David, Jennifer, and Maria had the skills to adapt when plans changed. Because Anna had the strength to betray a dangerous husband. And because sometimes impossible missions worked, not despite the risks, but because everyone involved chose to take those risks anyway. The helicopter lifted off, carrying them away. From the compound into war debriefing, paperwork, and eventually rest, Marcus looked over at Natasha, who had her eyes closed and her head resting against the vibrating wall of the aircraft. She looked exhausted but peaceful, as if a massive weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "Thank you," Marcus said, though. He knew she probably couldn't hear him over the helicopter noise. But Natasha opened her eyes and smiled slightly. "Thank you," she mouthed back. 3 weeks later, Marcus sat in a coffee shop in Washington, D.C., reading a newspaper report about the weapons bust. The article praised law enforcement cooperation and made no mention of individual agents or the specific details of how the operation had worked. That was fine with Marcus. The best missions were the ones no one ever heard about. Natasha walked into the coffee shop, looking different than she had in the compound. Her hair was styled differently. She wore civilian clothes, and there was a lightness in her expression that hadn't been there before. She sat down across from Marcus and ordered a coffee. "How are you adjusting?" Marcus asked. "Still figuring out who I am when I'm not pretending to be someone else," Natasha admitted. "But it's getting easier. I've been spending time with Anna, actually. She's starting a new life, too. We're both learning how to be ourselves again." "And what did you decide? About what comes next?" Natasha was quiet for a moment. "Sarah offered me a promotion, a desk job with more money and less risk. I turned it down." Marcus wasn't surprised. "Another deep cover assignment? Maybe eventually," Natasha said. "But first I'm taking time off. Real time off. I'm going to travel, see places where no one is trying to kill me, eat food that isn't served in a compound cafeteria. I'm going to remember what it feels like to be a person instead of a mission." "You deserve that," Marcus said sincerely. "We all do," Natasha replied. "You, me, everyone who does this work. We sacrifice pieces of ourselves every time we go out there. Sometimes we need to take time to find those pieces again." They talked for another hour, sharing stories, laughing at moments that hadn't been funny at the time, but were now safe enough to see the humor in. When they finally parted ways, Marcus watched Natasha walk down the street and disappear into the crowd of ordinary people living ordinary lives. The mission was approved for one reason, Sarah had said. She was already there. But missions were about more than strategic positioning and lucky timing. They were about people who made impossible choices in impossible situations. People who risked everything because someone had to, because the weapons had to be stopped, because innocent lives hung in the balance. Marcus finished his coffee and left the shop, heading back to his own life, his own missions, his own impossible choices that would need to be made. Somewhere in the mountains of Eastern Europe, a compound stood empty, its secrets exposed, its danger neutralized. And somewhere in Washington, D.C., a woman who had spent 9 months being someone else was finally learning how to be herself again. The mission was over, successful beyond what anyone had dared hope. But the cost of that success would stay with everyone involved for the rest of their lives. That was the price of doing the impossible. That was what it meant to be the one who was already there when the mission began, and the one who had to see it through to whatever end awaited them. And somehow, despite everything, despite the risks and the costs and the impossible odds, they had succeeded. The weapons were destroyed. The criminals were in prison. The innocent were safe. In the end, that was all that mattered. That was why they did this work, why they took these risks, why they chose to be the ones who stood between the world and the darkness that threatened it. The mission was complete. And for now, at least, the world was a little bit safer, because someone was already there when it mattered most.